Hi all, welcome to General Pathology sessions. In this video, we are going to discuss about cell injury. Cell injury is a very important topic regarding your university grade examinations, as it can be asked as a long essay type of question, or they can pick a few three subheadings from the cell injury and ask you as short essay questions. Okay, now let's see what is there in cell injury. Now, what is actually cell injury? You know what is injury? Injury occurring to your cell. Okay, so it is actually the functional or the morphological effect due to a various stress. What are the functional and morphological changes that is occurring in a cell due to an external stimulus or external stress when we give to a cell? There are some kind of changes occurring in the cell. So that changes are nothing but some injury to that cell. Okay, so this is due to some this is a functional or the morphological changes occurring in the cell due to an external stimuli or external stress. Okay, now this is due to some agents. There are certain agents which can cause trauma, certain agents which can cause injury to the cell. We will see the list of agents which can cause injury to the cell. Now what happens, from where this injury is coming? Injury can occur from inside or from the outside. Means there are something which happen in our body that can cause a trauma or changes to a cell injury can be caused from the factors coming from inside. Example, if you're having a lot of gastric acids in your body, that acids can cause injury to your mucosal epithelium in the stomach. So that is some internal agent. Now coming to talk about the external environment, your ultraviolet rays, okay, your harmful air outside, or any trauma occurring to your body from the external environment. So it can come from both internal and external environment, and the injury can be reversible or irreversible. Means when there is an injury occurring to the cell, it can cause it can be reversible or irreversible. Means thus when the injury comes to the cell can adapt to that stress. Okay, the cell can adapt to that stress and it can heal. Okay, that is called a reversible injury because cell can reverse its condition. If the stress is more than what the cell can hold, then it is called irreversible injury. Okay, now let's see what's there. Now, what are the causes of your cell injury? There is genetic cause and acquired cause. So there is both genetic and acquired cause for cell injury. Genetic means which we have got from the genes, or which is got from congenital way from the mother to the child, or during birth what we have got. Okay, so example, your congenital syphilis. So the congenital syphilis is occurring in a child, or the child gets congenital syphilis if the mother is infected by syphilis. So that is not the not a problem, not a problem of the child. It is a problem of the mother, that she has got a syphilis, and that is conveyed to the, or that is passed on to the child, and the child is having some manifestations of the syphilis. So that is all your congenital syphilis. Now genetic abnormalities like your Down syndrome or any syndrome. Okay, syndromes are transferred from one generation to another, so that is genetic. Okay, now single gene defect like a sickle cell anemia. You know the sickle cell anemia, the gene defect which can cause mutation in the your beta globin chain, which can cause a sickling disease. Okay, now there's other defects like your cleft lip and cleft palate, your glycogen storage diseases. Okay, so the myocardial disease, all these are coming under genetic. Coming to acquired, there is acquired hypoxia and ischemia. See, hypoxia and ischemia are the main factors that causes cell injury. Means a proper function, for the proper function of the cell, you needs proper oxygenation and proper vascular supply, blood supply. You know, the blood supply that maintains the proper oxygen of a cell, oxygen of a tissue, that makes the cell healthy and lively. Okay, if the oxygenation or the blood supply is lost, then the cell turns out to be injured, or cell injury happens, cell get ischemic. Okay, so ischemia, cell get ischemic or cell injury happens, and after certain time the cell has irreversible cell injury or cell death can occur. So main agent is your main cause is your hypoxia and ischemia. Now other agents like physical, chemical agents and drugs. The physical agents, okay, like your ultraviolet rays, that can cause damage to your body, cell injury. Chemical agents like your poisons or phenols or any other chemicals which can cause cell injury. Microbial or immunological agents, your bacteria that can cause cell injury. Nutritional derangements and idiopathic iatrogenic cause nutritional regime, vitamin deficiencies. Okay, so the cell cannot properly function when there is a deficiency of vitamin or mineral. All these can be reasons for cell injury. Now coming to the first one, hypoxia and ischemia. See, hypoxia, I have told you, hypoxia and ischemia are the major cause or the most common cause for the cell injury. Now, how a hypoxia happen? Hypoxia means that to a cell there we have blood supply here, blood vessels here. Okay, so the RBCs bring this oxygen from the lung to the cell. Okay, now if there is a reduced supply of this blood, okay, if there is a reduced supply of this blood, if you have some blood blockade in your blood vessel due to interruption means that there is a blockade in the blood vessel, there is atherosclerosis, or there is some kind of blockade, embolism. Okay, all these are causing block in the blood vessel so that the blood is not coming to the site. Okay, so that causes ischemia. Now other way of hypoxia is that there is no blockade in the cells, but you are not having enough number of RBCs, you are anemic. Okay, so when the impaired blood supply other than interruption, okay, like you are anemic, your anemia, you are having reduced RBCs, or your RBCs are not functioning properly. You are having some heart disease so that the heart is not pumping the blood properly. Your lung has some problem so that proper oxygen is not put to the blood. Okay, so all these can be the causes of your hypoxia. And coming to the physical agents, what are the physical agents? One is your mechanical trauma, your road accidents, okay, accidents which happen to you. The thermal trauma means hot bodies or heat or cold bodies. Okay, burns. Okay, electricity can get trauma from, you can get injury from the electricity shocks. Okay, now radiation, your ultraviolet radiation, your ionizing radiation, your X-rays, all these can harm your body by causing cell injury. And changes in the atmospheric pressure can also cause cell injury. Now coming to chemical agents, okay, what are the chemical agents? Mainly your poisons. Okay, poisons, I have told you, the cyanide, mercury poisoning, all these strong acids and alkalis means your hydrochloric acid, H2SO4, your sulfuric acid, if it fall on your body it can cause burns. Okay, chemical burns. Environmental pollutants, your insecticides and pesticides. The oxygen at high concentration means if you are pushing oxygen at high concentration, there is a more chance of formation of oxygen free radicals in our body, and free radical mediated cell injury can also happen, that we will come across. Okay, now there is a injury from salt or hypertonic glucose, because hypertonic glucose or hypertonic salt can cause drying of your skin or drying of your cells. Because when when a cell is in hypertonic solution, what happens in hypertonic solution? When a cell is put, the water from the cell comes out of the cell due to tonicity, due to osmotic pressure, and that can cause shrinking of the cell. Okay, just like how you are making pickles in your home, you put the mangoes inside a hypertonic solution of that, what happens? The water from the mango comes out and it gets shrunken. Okay, it shrinks in size and it gets rigid. Similarly, if you put a cell in a hypertonic solution, what happens? The water content will go out, and the water content in the cell is lost. Water is very much essential for the cell to survive. Okay, so that can be reason. And certain agents like as alcohol and your narcotic drugs. Okay, and some therapeutic drugs also. Your if you're having drugs, your may pay NSAIDs. All these drugs have some kind of side effects. These side effects can also cause cell injury. Now coming to microbial agents, the infection by your bacteria, virus, rickettsia, fungi, protozoa, all these microbial agents can cause injury in your cell. Now coming to immunological agents, they are like your allergic reaction, your anaphylactic reaction, hypersensitivity, and autoimmune disorders. Autoimmune disorders means your own body's immunity is acting against your own cell. Okay, autoimmune. So antibodies are produced in our body, that antibodies are directed against antigens in our own body. Okay, for example, your Sjogren syndrome, your SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus, all these are autoimmune diseases. so that our own antibodies are directed against our own cells, so our cells are destroyed or damaged. Anaphylactic reaction, if you are allergic to something, if you are allergic to any chemical agent in a drug, you may develop anaphylaxis, okay, or hypersensitivity. Now coming to nutritional derangement, nutrition is very much required for your proper maintenance of your cell, okay, cell health. Now, if the nutrition is less or nutrition is more, both can affect your cell. The nutrition should be adequate, not more, not less. If it is less, then you may have starvation. You may have conditions like anemia, marasmus, kwashiorkor. Okay, all these are nutritional deficiencies. Now, if the nutrition is more, you may get toxicity of this nutrition. You are having lot of vitamin A. You are having lot of vitamins in your body. What happens is that you are having a lot of vitamins that can cause toxicity in your body, hypervitaminosis. Similarly, you may get obesity, you may get atherosclerosis, there is so much of fat in your body, okay, heart disease, hypertension, all these can occur. So if there is more and more nutrition, more and more fat in your body, that is very bad, right? Similarly, more and more vitamins which our body doesn't require, then that cause hypervitaminosis. Okay, so those conditions can harm your cells. Now coming to the pathogenesis of cell injury, what really happens in the cell injury? Now so far we have seen what is cell injury, what are the genetic and acquired causes of cell injury, and we have seen each individual causes what can cause cell injury. Now coming to pathogenesis of cell injury, now whatever be the cause is, what really happens in a cell, how a cell injury occurs. Now the cell injury actually depend upon certain factors. Okay, each cell has their own way of getting injured, or the injury suffered by one cell is very different from the injury suffered by the other cell. Okay, means that if you are giving ionizing radiations, if you are getting lot of ionizing radiation, certain cells in our body, okay, certain cells in our body like your brain cells, or certain cells in our body like your glandular cells, okay, they will respond very fast. Your stem cells, okay, all these cells are very fragile for your radiation, but your muscle cells, okay, they are very resistant to your radiation. So it depends upon the type of cell, okay. So here the factor depending on the etiological agent and the host, okay. So the injury, the type of injury, how much the cell can get injured, depend upon what type of injury is coming and what is the host here means that which cell we are giving this injury. Every cell does not respond similar way. So the type, duration and severity of the infectious agent, the type, status and adaptability of the target cell, that's what I mean. The type, duration and severity of the injury, what type of injury you are giving, whether it is chemical or your physical, okay, how much duration you are giving, just for few days or few minutes or few seconds, or for a longer period of time, and how severe you are giving, how much severe the injury is, okay. So you may have a small hit by your hand and a road traffic accident, both are having two extreme severities, right? How severe the injury is. Now what type of the target cell is, where the injury is occurring, okay, that depends. Now coming to the mechanism, but even whatever the injury be, there is a common mechanism for this injury. The most common affected organelle in your cell due to injury is your mitochondria. So mitochondria, mitochondria is the powerhouse of your cell where the ATP is made. Okay, so mitochondrial damage, what happens if your mitochondria is damaged? ATP is declining, your ATP reduce, and ATP is the energy currency, okay, the energy inside the cell. So if the ATP is depleted, what happens? All the cellular functions will go down. It's actually a complete shutdown of your cell, okay. So the cell membrane will be damaged, okay, because ATP is required for the protein pumps, your sodium potassium pump, your calcium pump to act, you need ATP. So the cellular membrane, in the cellular membrane, that will be disturbed. So your mitochondria is disturbed, your cellular membrane is disturbed, okay, and both of these can result in a cellular injury. Now what is the first change you should change, morphological change in a cell when a cell undergoes injury. Now we have a cell here. When the cell undergoes a injury, the first thing happen is that there is a swelling of the cell, and that swelling is called hydropic swelling. Okay, that is a morphological change that occur in a reversible cell injury. If it's a cell injury, the first one is a cell injury of to occur. So if there is a cell, when there is a stimulus, okay, the cell can undergo reversible cell injury. Cell injury. Okay, there's a normal cell here. Now, first when there is a stimulus, okay, when there is a stress, it undergo reversible cell injury. Now, in the reversible cell injury, what happens is that when the stress, if we remove the stress, it can heal. It can heal. But if we are giving more and more stress, what happens is that the cell will undergo irreversible cell injury. Okay, so there is irreversible cell injury, and what happens? The cell will undergo death. Okay, cell death can occur. So this is a sequelae. So first, a normal cell which faces a stress, it can undergo reversible cell injury. Now you have to learn what are the certain changes occurring in reversible cell injury. So it's okay. So far it is okay. Now we are giving more stress, then what happens? This much changes occurs and the cell will undergo death. So you should study what are the changes which occur in a reversible cell injury. What are the changes which occur in a irreversible cell injury? Now let's see. So there is a, in the end, what happens? There is a functional loss. The cell will lose its function, and there is disease. Means there is symptoms and signs will be shown by the cell. Now coming to the pathogenesis of your ischemic and hypoxic cell injury. What happens when there is ischemia and hypoxia? We are taking the first type of stress. It's the most common type of stress, that is ischemia and hypoxia. Now what happens? Can you see this flow chart? Now we are having ischemia and hypoxia. So what happens in a cell? Inside the cell there is cell ischemia and hypoxia. So I have told you, when there is ischemia and hypoxia, there is a reduced ATP generation because it first affects your mitochondria. Now we don't have any ATP. Now what happens is that it will affect your sodium potassium pump, it will affect your calcium pump, and there is an increase in the cytosolic calcium. There is increase in the calcium present in the cell. So we have a cell here, we have your nucleus, we have your mitochondria, your Golgi bodies, everything. So what happens is that there is a reduced ATP. As there is reduced ATP, your calcium pump or your potassium sodium pump, no pumps are working here. What happens when the pump is not working? Your calcium start accumulating in your cell. That's why it is called increase in cytoplasmic calcium. And the same calcium can accumulate in your mitochondria. The mitochondrial calcium also increased. So there is increase in cytoplasmic calcium and increase in mitochondrial calcium. Calcium is increasing in our body. Now what happens when calcium is increasing more than the what is required in a cell? The calcium will activate certain enzymes. Okay, calcium dependent enzymes, they activate the phospholipase and they activate protease. So they activate something which digests the phospholipase. Phospholipase is an enzyme which which digests the or which break down the phospholipid, and protease is a enzyme which digests the proteins in the cell. What does the phospholipase do? They will digest the phospholipid. Where is your phospholipid? The phospholipid is in the cell membrane. Phospholipid, the cell membrane is made by the phospholipids. Okay, the phospholipase will what? Destroy your cell membrane, that is increase loss of membrane phospholipid. So this ATP can also reduce the synthesis of cell membrane. As there is a reduced ATP, there is a reduced synthesis of cell membrane. Also this phospholipase will increase the digestion of cell membrane also. So consecutive damage, there is a collateral damage there. Okay, and what happens next? The protease What does this protease do? The protease will break down the cytoskeletal protein in the cell. What are the cytoskeletal proteins? Your keratins or your tonofilaments, all the protein component in the cell is broken down. So what happens? The phospholipase that will break down all the lipid products. Your phospholipid cell membrane also broken down. The protease will break down all your cytoskeletal proteins. Okay, and eventually what happens? The cell membrane is destroyed. The cell membrane is destroyed. Now, if the cell membrane is destroyed, what happens? There is liberation of this intranuclear enzymes. All the enzymes in the cell will come out. When the cell membrane is destroyed, what happens? We have a cell, we have a cell membrane destroyed here. So all the cellular components will leak outside. This is what happens. Also, if there is a reduced ATP, there is more amount of oxygen radicals, oxygen free radicals. These free radicals are very harmful. The free radicals are very harmful because free radical can cause lipid peroxidation and DNA damage. This free radicals can damage your DNA. Okay, so all these together, okay, can damage the cell membrane. So what happens? As we told, there is ischemia and hypoxia. The ischemia and hypoxia is reducing the ATP in your cell. So ATP is reduced. Okay, so there is no oxygen, there is no energy, no ATP. When the ATP is reduced, all the pumps in your cell membrane, your cellular membrane pumps are all blocked. There is increase in the cellular calcium, increase in the mitochondrial calcium. What this calcium do? They will activate or they will help the action of your phospholipase. Lipase is an enzyme which digests lipid. So where is the lipid in your cell? Intracellular lipids. Okay, the lipid present in the cells, inside the cells are broken down. The lipid present in the basement in your cell membrane is broken down. Okay, and ATP generation can also reduce the synthesis of your cell membrane. It can ATP reduction in the ATP can activate your free radicals. The free radicals can in turn damage your DNA. So there is a combination of damages occurring in the cell, and the cell membrane is damaged and the cell components leak out. So what are the changes you can see here? When the cell membrane is damaged, the nucleus will also get damaged. It is called pycnosis, karyorrhexis, and karyolysis. Karyolysis means there is a lysis of a nucleus. So what happens? There is cell death. Okay, and what else you can see is that there is an increase in your serum enzymes, because the enzymes present in the cells will leak out and it will be present in your blood. Okay, so these serum enzymes will help you diagnose a cell injury which is occurring in your body. So that's why whenever there is a liver disease, whenever there is a heart disease, we are testing for the liver function test, your kidney function test. Yeah? Okay, all these enzymes are checked in your blood, because why? The cell death or cell injury can result in the leaking of its enzyme into the blood. So this is what really happens in a ischemia. Now coming to the reversible cell injury, what else you can see? This is a pictorial representation of what happening in the reversible cell injury. There is the main thing is that there is a swelling of your endoplasmic reticulum and the mitochondria, and you can see some membrane blebs which is seen. Okay, membrane blebs. Now this is a reversible cell injury where the cell can recover back to the normal when the stimulus is removed. Now what are the things you see in a reversible cell injury? This is a very important area. The sequential steps in the biochemical and ultrastructural changes which occur in the cell injury. What are the steps which occur in the reversible cell injury? What happens inside the cell? So first one, I have told you, there is a decreased generation of cellular ATP. Now that you understood, the first thing to happen due to ischemia or your hypoxia is that there is a reduction in the ATP. Now what happens next when there is reduction in the ATP? There is an intracellular lactic acidosis. Whenever there is a decrease in the ATP, what happens? The cell will change its aerobic pathway to anaerobic pathway. Now, aerobic and anaerobic pathway. In the first year, your biochemistry, you have seen the aerobic pathway, your curve cycle, your glycolysis cycle, and your anaerobic pathway. Now, in aerobic pathway, what is the byproduct? That is ATP. Okay, ATP is produced in the aerobic pathway, but in anaerobic pathway, there is a byproduct. Which is that byproduct in anaerobic pathway? That is called lactic acid. Lactic acid. So whenever there is a reduction in the supply, reduction in the oxygen, whenever there is hypoxia, whenever there is ischemia, our cell will change because it is not getting oxygen. Now there is it can't follow aerobic pathway. It is not getting oxygen because of this ischemia. So the cell will change its nutrition status from aerobic to anaerobic. Now, anaerobic pathway, the byproduct is lactic acid. So, what happens? There is a switching of this aerobic pathway to anaerobic pathway because of the depletion of glycogen, and there occurs a lactic acid. The byproduct is lactic acid. The lactic acid will, what it will do? It will reduce the pH inside the cell. Now, there is acidic environment in the cell. Now, if there is acidic environment, there is a fall in the intercellular pH. There is acidic environment. What happens? The nuclear chromatin will start clumping. Your nuclear chromatin will start clumping because of this acidic environment. Now, what's next? There is a damage to the plasma membrane pumps. I have told you, when there is decrease in ATP, all your plasma membrane pump, your sodium potassium pump, your calcium pump, because all these pumps are present on the cell surface. Okay, so these pumps are present on the cell surface, and these pumps are working on ATP. Okay, as there is a lack of ATP, what happens? There is a damage to the membrane pumps, your sodium, potassium, and the calcium pump. Now, what happens when there is a damage to the membrane pumps? What happens if your sodium potassium pump is damaged? There is a lower ATP in the cell. ATP is what reduced. Now, the activity of the sodium pump is reduced. Now, what if the activity of the sodium pump is reduced? There is a defective membrane regulated process. There is a defect in the cellular membrane regulated process, and there will be accumulation of sodium and diffusion of potassium out of cell. Okay, so there is a diffusion of this potassium out of cell, and there is accumulation of sodium inside the cell. Now, what happens when there is more sodium inside the cell? You have lot of sodium inside the cell. What happens? You are putting, you imagine that you are having more of salt concentration in an area. What happens? The fluid will come into that area because of the osmotic pressure. Okay, in your first year physiology classes, you may have studied about this osmotic pressure. Whenever there is a high concentration of salt, there is high osmotic pressure, and it will absorb more water. So what happens? There is more and more water coming into the cell. There is more sodium, so more water will go into the cell. What happens to this cell? That will swell. More and more water coming in, so there is swelling of the cell. This is called hydropic swelling. Now you understood how the hydropic swelling happens. There is a decrease in ATP. There is a defective sodium potassium pump. So sodium is retaining in the cell, potassium is going out of the cell. There is more and more sodium in the cell. More and more sodium in the cell make there is high osmotic pressure, and that happens when there is more and more water comes to the cell, and it will cause swelling. That is called hydropic swelling. Now, what if the failure of calcium pump? There is a failure of calcium pump. There is excessive calcium will come into the cell. Okay, there is more and more calcium into the cell. So I have told you there is more and more calcium in the cell. We have seen this. When there is more and more calcium in the cell, mainly in the mitochondria also, there is more and more calcium. And you know how this calcium is going to destroy your phospholipids, how this calcium is going to destroy your proteins in the body, that we have seen in the flow chart. Now coming to the last stage, we have increased ATP, we have hydropic degeneration, you have a hydropic swelling, you have your chromatin clumping, there is lactic acidosis, pH of the cell is increased. Now all these can result in your reduced protein synthesis. The ribosomes are dispersed. The ribosomes are the one which make the protein that gets dispersed, and the ribosomes which are attached to your endoplasmic reticulum. You know, these ribosomes are attached to your endoplasmic reticulum, that is a rough endoplasmic reticulum. Their ribosomes will detach from this rough endoplasmic reticulum and they freely float in the cell. Okay, they get detached. There's a detachment of this ribosome from the endoplasmic reticulum, and the ribosomes are degraded by your cellular enzymes and they are degraded to monosomes. So we are losing ribosomes. You know, ribosomes are required for the protein synthesis. The ribosomes detach from the endoplasmic reticulum and they are digested. There is no ribosome. What happens is that there is reduction in the protein synthesis. Now coming to irreversible cell injury. Now so far we have seen reversible cell injury. We have decreased ATP, we have lactic acidosis, we have chromatin clumping, we have hydropic swelling, we have reduced protein synthesis, our ribosomes are detaching from the endoplasmic reticulum. So far it is reversible. Now, if the stress is removed, so far the cells can come back to the normal stage. Now here, more and more, the sequence of event is coming more and more stress is given. The cell will undergo what? Irreversible cell injury. Now, if you see in this figure, there is a normal cell. We have an injury here. Now, in the reversible cell injury, what happens? There is a swelling of the endoplasmic reticulum and the mitochondria, and so far it can heal. Okay, it can heal and it can come back to the normal stage. So that is called reversible cell injury. But if we are giving more and more stimulus, what happens is that there is irreversible cell injury. There is changes in the nucleus. The nucleus will change. There is so many irreversible changes occur in the cells. We will see what are the irreversible changes going to occur, and in the end there is necrosis and the cell is dead here. Okay, there is the cell death. Now coming to irreversible cell injury, there is two things you should know which differentiate irreversible to the reversible. Now what happens in irreversible cell injury? Now in irreversible cell injury, the cell cannot go back to the original state. The cell cannot come back to the original state. There is inability of the cell to reverse the mitochondrial dysfunction on reperfusion or reoxygenation. We are giving oxygen, so we are giving again oxygen because of the hypoxia the reversible cell injury occurs. If you give oxygen, the reversible cell injury can convert to the normal cell. But what is irreversible cell injury? Even after we give more and more oxygen, these cells cannot come back to the normal state. It is already under irreversible cell injury state. Okay, so there is a disturbance in the membrane function and mainly in the plasma membrane. So what happens in irreversible injury? There is more and more reduction in the ATP. There is continued depletion of the protein, further reduction in the pH, and this lysosomal enzymes will leak into the plasma. Okay, leakage of this, I have told you the cell membrane breaks and there's leakage of this enzymes. Now in irreversible cell injury, what all things happen? The calcium influx will damage the mitochondria. The phospholipases will damage the membrane. I have told you the phospholipase which is activated by this calcium, it will damage the cell membrane. The intracellular protease will damage the cytoskeletal structures, your keratin, your tonofilaments, and endonucleases that will damage your nucleus. So finally, in an irreversible cell injury, the nucleus is also damaged. Now see what nuclear damage is occurring. So the irreversible damage to the nucleus can occur in three ways. One is karyolysis, means the nucleus is lysed into small fragments. Okay, now the pyknosis means nuclear shrinkage, and karyorrhexis is that the nucleus is fragmented. Okay, nucleus is fragmented, and all these can result in the damage of your nucleus or your DNA. Now coming into the lysosomal enzymes which are leaking out in the plasma cells, these lysosomal enzymes they can damage the cell, because this lysosome has enzymes which can lyse the cell. Okay, these enzymes, they are having certain enzymes. These lysosomes are vesicles in the cells. They contain enzymes. Okay, these enzymes has the ability to digest cells. Okay, they are lysosomal enzyme that can digest. Now there is another type of injury called ischemia reperfusion injury. Now you may ask that if we give more and more oxygen, will it be helpful to our body? Okay, so we have an injury, the cell is injured, the cell is in a reversible stage. We give oxygen, it is healing and it converts to normal cell. Now there is a cell injury. It is more and more stress is given. It is going to an irreversible cell injury. Now we are giving more and more oxygen, trying to save the cell. Okay, is that good that we give more and more oxygen to that cell? So that condition we should learn about irreversible in ischemia reperfusion injury or free radical mediated cell injury. Now, what is ischemia reperfusion injury is that, so if the ischemia is for a longer time, the cell has undergone ischemia for a longer time, and we are giving reperfusion, we are giving oxygen, we are giving blood. Now, what happens rather than healing, there is more damage occurring. How that is happening? So there is a injury, there is an ischemia which is happened for a longer duration of time. There is a ischemia. Now the patient has come to us and we are giving oxygen, we are giving blood supply, we are giving more and more oxygen and blood supply. So we are expecting that the cell will recover, but instead of that there is more injury happening to the cell. How that is happening? So rather than restoring the structure and function, there is more injury occur, or paradoxically more deterioration occur in the cell, and this can lead to cell death. This is called ischemia reperfusion injury, mainly seen in cerebral ischemia or myocardial infarctions. Okay, now how this ischemia reperfusion injury occurs? If we give more and more oxygen, more and more free radicals are formed. So we are giving excessive accumulation. Excessive oxygen can lead to excessive production of oxygen free radicals or reactive oxygen species. These reactive oxygen species are free radicals that can cause damage to your cell membrane. It can cause damage to your DNA. It can cause lipid peroxidations. Okay, these free radicals are very much harmful to our body. So our body is usually remove these free radicals. But in an injured state, if you are giving more and more oxygen, more and more reperfusion, what happens is that there is more and more production of these free radicals. Okay, and that free radicals can result in this calcium overload. There is excessive calcium, and excessive generation of free radicals can be your superoxide, hydrogen peroxide, okay, hydroxyl radical, and it can also stimulate inflammatory reaction, and this free radical can damage your DNA, can damage your lipid peroxidations. Okay, now coming to the pathogenesis of chemical injury, what happens in a chemical injury? So far we have seen injury due to hypoxia and ischemia, how it happen, how what are the steps in a reversible injury, what happens in a irreversible injury. Now coming to the chemical injury, these chemicals which can kill our cell in two ways. Either the chemical can kill the cell by its own, or the chemical goes inside our body, is digested, and some of the byproduct of the digestion will kill our cell. Okay, so the chemical, if the chemical we accidentally ingest some kind of chemicals or poisons, the poisons can directly kill our, okay, that is direct cytotoxicity. The poison itself can kill the cell, or the poison is taken into the cell and it is digested, and by the process of this digesting some byproduct is formed from this, and that byproduct is poisonous and that can kill. Okay, so that is the conversion of this chemical into a reactive metabolite. The cell will convert this poison to a reactive metabolite, and that reactive metabolite can kill. Okay, so that is the action of chemicals. Now there's an example for both. Okay, the pathogenesis of chemical injury, there is direct cytotoxic effect and the toxic metabolites. Example, if you have this mercury chloride poisoning, that can cause direct damage to your alimentary canal, your kidney, and it can kill. Okay, the cyanide also, the cyanide that can activate or attack your mitochondrial cytochrome oxidase, and it can reduce your ATP production. It can block the oxidation phosphorylation, and it can directly kill the cell. Now coming to your paracetamol, if you talk about acetaminophen, okay, acetaminophen, your paracetamol, the paracetamol is a drug which we usually have, but the byproduct, okay, byproduct of this acetaminophen is very much toxic to your liver. Okay, it can cause reaction and it can cause necrosis in the liver, so that's why it is harmful. Okay, this is about your chemical injury. And coming to the physical injury, what is happens in the physical injury is that it is acting directly on the cell. Example is your ionizing radiation. Okay, ionizing radiation, what they can do is that when the ionizing radiation, your UV rays, your X rays, when they fall on the cell, they make free radicals. They make hydroxy free radicals due to splitting of water. The water present in our body is split, and there is a production of free radical, and this free radical will attack your cell membrane, or it can attack your DNA. Now let's see what's happening. So we have a ionizing radiation here, and it falls on your water, and there is free radical. Okay, there is hydroxy radical formation. This hydroxy radical will act on the cells, and they can cause DNA damage. They can cause mutations, or they can cause apoptosis, or the damage or killing of the cell. And this hydroxy radicals, they can act on the non-proliferating cells also. They can cause lipid peroxidation, and this lipid peroxidation can cause cell membrane damage, and finally necrosis. So this is the sequelae or the steps of your damage by physical injury. So we have seen cell injury. What is cell injury? What is reversible and irreversible cell injury? What are the different factors of cell injury? What are the different steps in reversible injury? What you see in reversible cell injury? What you see in irreversible cell injury? And what are the different ways of what your hypoxia induced injury? What is the different chemical based injury? What is your physical based injury? Okay, so this is all about your cell injury. This is asked as a long essay for your university grade examinations. Thank you.